Welcome to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Jim Bates, Director of Risk and Credit at Access Financial. Thanks for joining me, Jim.
Thanks for inviting us, Jesse. Looking forward to it.
No, it's great to have you on here. I had the privilege of working with Justin on a project, I want to say probably about a year and a half ago when you guys were just getting into this space. And I'm really interested to see how things are going a couple of years later. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So for those individuals who have probably had the pleasure yet of meeting you, Jim, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and career to date in equipment finance?
Sure. I'm one of the lucky ones. I consider myself lucky. I've been in equipment finance my entire 35-year career. It's all I've done after college. And I've got a lot of good breadth of experience. Started in the industry. I was a new hire out of college from Caterpillar and was going to be in their finance and treasury group. It was 1988. They hired two of us. It was pretty momentous because it was the first time they'd hired multiple people for expansion in that group since their financial woes in the early 80s. So, I get everything set up, move over to the Peoria area. The day right before I'm supposed to start, the campus recruiter left a note on my door. He's like, "Jim, something's changed. Give me a call." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they don't know what they're going to do with us." So, I gave him a call and he said, "Hey, I just want to let you know we're going to move you to our new venture, Caterpillar Financial." And reported, first day I reported was to Lynn McFeeters, the Chief Credit Officer, and Jim Beard, the CEO. And, I've been doing this ever since. Actually kind of a funny story. I got home from work that night, my mom called, "Hey, Jim, how'd your day go?" I'm like, "Oh, pretty good, but, I've got some news." And, she said, "What?" And I go, "Well, they're going to put me in this Caterpillar Financial thing, and they're going to move me to Maryland." And there was just pause on the phone. I grew up in Illinois, went to school in Illinois, and I said, "Mom, are you okay? Are you there?" And she goes, "Well," and I'm 22 years old. She goes, "Jim, if you want to move, you can." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks, Mom. I really appreciate it." So we have her to thank for this. But no, I spent roughly 3 years at Caterpillar Financial as a collector, and with it being a new entity, a homegrown system, I just kind of immerse myself in everything of the business. I mean, collection, obviously, you have your key, you have your companies that you have to call, but the underwriting aspect when you had to restructure a deal, the documentation aspect if you're going to do skip payments or something like that, lien searches. It's really I learned it's really kind of a sales job, because what you're trying to do is get these small operators to pay you before they pay somebody else. So had a lot of really good experience there. You had a bunch of 22, 23, 24-year-old people there, and you just kind of had to wait your turn to go through the rotation, collections, credit, kind of inside sales. And I was not as patient maybe as I should have been. And I saw this company, Textron Financial, all of a sudden started winning some of the dealer portfolios that we thought we would win. And looked up and saw the UCC searches. They had a Columbia, Maryland address. So I reached out, and that was really their sales office, but they needed a credit person down in Atlanta. So I, in 90, moved down to Atlanta and started my career in credit. And again, I was just so fortunate. It was a multidiscipline role. We underwrote the deal, we structured it, we documented, input it in the system, collected it, did all the terminations. It was everything basically except sales.
Did Mom approve of the move from Maryland to Atlanta?
By then she had let go. She let me.
Okay. Sorry.
Just my own chops. It was nice of her though.
Throwing it out there.
But one of the things I really developed a strong interest and I think a good ability at CAT and Textron was on the documentation side. And I was presented with an opportunity to move over to Nations Bank Leasing and be a manager and then ultimately run their documentation group, which I did for 3 years. And just so much. We built an automated document system. We did a lot of corporate aircraft, that's something I hadn't been exposed to before. We didn't even have counsel. Here I am, 27, 28, 5-6 years in the industry. And you just say, okay, well, negotiate the documents. If you think you need help, we had an attorney on retainer. So it was just like,
yeah,
we trust you, just don't mess up. I really like the experience and the people. Started kind of evaluating what I really wanted to do in my career, and it was ultimately to be a chief credit officer, director of credit. So I decided to get back into credit. Wasn't real interested in doing bank credits. Too much elevator analysis for me. So I made the move over to CIT for a little while. Got put in a position where it was more of their traditional yellow iron, which I didn't feel like was a good fit. And Nations Commercial Credit came calling. Nations Credit had acquired a computer reseller lessor VAR in Cleveland. LDI Technologies was the name. Converted it to a general or a mid-ticket generalist equipment finance company, non-regulated, so they could go a little more down market. And we underwrote those deals. And probably 6-7 months into the experience, we really got, I felt like we got a really good groove. We had good flow business coming in. I think we had really gotten our processes and everything down, and Nations decided they didn't want to be in that business. That was
great. Great. Thanks.
That was about 97, 98. And the only good part about that is it was a fantastic time to be looking for a job in this industry. I think I had 4 or 5 offers, quite honestly. And somebody that had worked with me at Nations, who got severed before me, I was kind of on the transition team all the way to the end, introduced me to the fine folks at Transamerica, and joined Dave Fate and Bill Farrell and them there. It's where I really got a lot of exposure to the buy, capital markets on the buy side. Had a six-year run there. Sold to GE, started AIG, another 6-year run until AIG had liquidity issues. Sure. And their credit created and ran the funding and administration desk, put together all the policies and procedures and all that. But that's where I feel like I really transformed from being a credit or risk person to an equipment finance professional. I mean, that group was just so fantastic about sharing information.
You take a look at what those guys did now. I mean, you got Kirk, you got Dave, you got Fluharty. I mean, those are the people who are running the industry right now. It's crazy. I didn't know. It really is.
And that's, even though I was, at that point, maybe 10 years into my career, and you'll have mentors all along. Those are the guys I really consider as my mentor. And it's, kind of wherever I've been, I've taken the bits and pieces, from those experiences and have applied them in my, subsequent roles. After AIG moved into SunTrust Equipment Finance, kind of revamped their portfolio management.
So is there any states you haven't lived in?
I
mean, the majority of these companies are on the East Coast.
Texas is the farthest west I've been. So anything west of Texas, I haven't lived in.
Okay. Sorry.
Um, so SunTrust had put together just a fantastic team. I've always been really big on trying to bring in some younger talent to the industry and train them, because it's not like you
Sure.
take equipment finance classes in college or whatever. So built a really great team. Um, I thought we did just a phenomenal job there. You had some upheaval when about half the company left and went with Dan McHugh to his next one, but we persevered and we thrived, and that's where I was really exposed to municipal lending. I kind of took over the credit aspect of that. Learned a lot, and that's one thing I love about this industry so much. You learn something every day.
It's like they will pay, they just won't pay on time.
Exactly. We had
sorry.
From SunTrust, I got recruited to help start Hancock Whitney Equipment Finance, which was, even though at SunTrust we were bank owned, Hancock was really where I felt the bank regulatory issues affecting my business. But one of the great things about that role was that it was the smallest entity I've worked at before. It just, I don't know, I want to say maybe 25 billion or 30 billion in assets at the time, and
Yeah.
what we did really mattered. I mean, our growth was the bank's growth. The higher margins that we got really impacted our parent, and that was really neat to see. After Hancock, I took about a 9 months or a year of a little personal sabbatical, and kind of evaluated how I wanted to come back into the industry, what I really wanted to do. And what I found, I felt like, well, one, I enjoyed and I felt like I was good at. And again, I'm going to go back, thanks to Transamerica, thanks to AIG, what was building something or transforming something. So I had a couple of short-term kind of engagements. And finally, in May of 19, I believe it was, I answered probably one of the craziest LinkedIn personal or employment ads I had ever seen. It was all over. I knew they wanted to finance equipment for the cannabis industry. I didn't know if they wanted a janitor or a chief credit officer. And against my better judgment, I applied for the position, got a call, had an initial call with David Kivitz, our CEO. And, as you do in any interview, you research the company, you research the interviewer, and David's background is in specialty finance, private equity type lending. And I thought, oh my gosh, how are we going to run an equipment finance company with that kind of mentality? So I'm like, should I take the call? I took it. David and I hit it off fantastic. One of the nicest, just truly nicest, genuine, most genuine people I've met. And, he got a couple of free underwritings from me. We talked about a lot of things, and he had all these great ideas, from a private equity background. And I'm like, no, you can't do that in equipment finance. It felt like 90% of the times I told him, no, we can't do that. We need to be equipment finance. Somehow we kept talking. We wanted to join forces, but at that point, it's pre-pandemic. He couldn't quite get past having remote people, and I couldn't get past moving to Southern California, new company, really a new industry. And,
sure.
Told him that, and he's like, well, I'm glad you said that, because if you wanted to move, I probably wouldn't want you, because I'd have to wonder why. But we stayed in touch, and he would call me asking about different things. I'd see announcements for them. I'd call. they hired somebody. I kind of helped onboard the person, and just had a great relationship over a year's time. And as I was kind of winding my time down at Arvest, I was building out an app-only credit scoring model. David, we had, COVID was there. Everybody was remote.
Hey, go figure.
So, I joined in May of 20 officially. And, over the last 3 years, we've built a traditional equipment finance company servicing a very non-traditional industry. And one of the things, we've had to kind of, there are some boundaries where they kind of meet, and you kind of have to merge those a little bit. But we've built a $100 million portfolio. We're really the only company that's doing this to scale across the U.S. And our early conversations, I had mentioned to David that he tells me all these grand plans. I said, okay, what's next? He said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you're just not going to be, thrive forever as a single industry equipment finance company. You have to go somewhere else. So we started talking about different add-ons, industries or whatever, back in 2019 and earlier this year, kind of decided that rather than focus on an industry, we're going to focus on a credit band, just buy deals through the capital market structure. It's just such an efficient origination platform. So, we've been putting everything together to do that. So
that's awesome.
That's the 35 years.
That's quite, and there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. So first of all, from a CAD financial perspective, when they said Maryland, did you say why not Nashville, or did they not have the Nashville?
This was before Nashville.
This was before Nashville.
Yeah.
Okay. So that shows my blissful ignorance to
if
Caterpillar.
You see the gray here, that I wasn't here.
Well, you may have 10 years on me, but I have more gray hair than you. So, oh, that's fantastic. So, so you've had the opportunity to work for a captive. By the way, I love that model. I love the model where it's I call it the Great America model, because that's where I first saw it. Where it's like you literally, when they start somebody, they start you in collections.
Yep.
And then docs, like credit, and you go all the way around until you learn the entire life cycle of a transaction. And I don't know if they do that a lot now. I think things are more specialized, but I love the model.
It tends to be, and regardless if I've been running the documentation side or the credit side or all of operations, we've been in a fortunate period. We've had some blips along the way, but you haven't had, you just don't, at least in the middle market, we haven't experienced, that typical 3 to 5% 30-day delinquency. So you don't really have something that you can give somebody full time, but you can break down all of your job functions into, okay, here's really what someone needs on a beginning basis. And I learned that at SunTrust, overseeing their portfolio management, doing the periodic reviews. I was able to kind of equate, we weren't calling people for money, but we had to touch them every year to make sure that, we had the right ratings. And I've always tried to build something where there's a space for someone new to come in. Doesn't have, they don't have to have experience. I generally like, somebody to have some business experience, but they just have to have a desire to learn. And if someone asks me why a couple of times in an interview, they're probably going to be hired, because that's just the best question. And
sure.
we try to do that. But you're right. We're very specialized now. Where people get into credit or people get into documentation or operations. You have career collectors and workout people. So as a manager, if you really want to build an equipment finance professional, you really have to seek out those places where you can bring in a new person, teach them the business, and show them a path and let them go through the path to grow and to develop into that.
It's great. It's a great comment. To ask me questions. That's fantastic. And so started off with a captive,
Yep.
then some banks, independents, and then left the bank to go recently to an independent to start something, to grow something. Like, what are your thoughts on those different channels? I mean, it's one of the cool things about this industry. I mean, I'm a kind of a one-trick pony. I've only been a service provider, so I don't think you've been on that side. Even though you're a service provider to your customers, I get that. But so,
it's if you're as fortunate as I have been to experience all of them, I think what you can do is really peel off the good pieces, the good practices everywhere you've been. At CAT at the time, we were actually the worst world of captive finance because we generally didn't, I mean, you almost couldn't say no. You never got the recourse from the vendors. When you did repossess something and sell it, they're going to buy it at, 50%, of original cost. So we had all the worst things really. And we didn't make a lot of margin. We were there to, support the sales of CAT product. But still you've got, it allowed me to really learn the construction and mining industry. It began my interest in kind of understanding evaluation. I mean, that is the depreciation scale there is pretty predictable. And once you start that and you start applying it to other things, and early on when I'd do a production line, it was like, but it's like learning a new language. You start out, you hear the language you're trying to learn and you think in English. Well, that's how I would, early on, I would think in Caterpillar or yellow iron. And then eventually it just became, part of my brain. But yeah, the independents, good and bad. A lot of the independents I've been with have been insurance companies who have had a tendency to get out of the industry. You've been several times.
So when that organization said, I think we're going to focus on yellow iron, you got PTSD a little bit. You're just
exactly.
Like, no, I'm good.
That's right. And then on the bank side, it was interesting. I think we were just big enough and operated independently of the bank long enough that I didn't really feel like I was at a bank at SunTrust. Every once in a while, when we were audited by the Fed, I think at the time we were the Fed's largest financial institution they directly oversaw. But the big thing was where I saw the regulation and I felt really part of a bank was at Whitney Hancock. And they're, again, smaller bank, 200-year-old bank, state chartered. But actually, I think Whitney was state chartered and Hancock was federally chartered. But that's where we really, a lot of the things we did, especially starting the equipment finance business, which neither bank had, we had to go through a lot of the regulatory, I think it was peer reviews or something like that, just to make sure we were
just to make sure that you were spending enough money on compliance.
I guess, man. But I mean, I think you can if you want, regardless of the experience, you can focus on the negative or you can focus on the positive and learning. And
Sure.
that I've done the latter. So
Absolutely.
I'm very happy and look back fondly at all the experiences that I've had.
So I guess let's just talk excess. I mean, you
Mhm.
gave a good little overview, but so you're in the cannabis industry, a couple years old, Southern California, you're in Texas, other states that you guys are in, or
Sure. So we started as extraction services, which is the excess and excess financial.
oh, I'm
Gosh,
sorry, I said that
six,
again.
no, that's fine. 6 years ago, I think it was. And um, our founders, David Kivitz and Anthony Radbot, our COO, uh, had done different types of specialty finance. They kind of ended projects at the same time. They'd known each other for a long time and decided they wanted to work and try to lend to the cannabis industry. They started out with kind of a project finance or senior secured type financing. And they found out very quickly they were going to have to raise a hell of a lot more money, because you have no amortization. And really, your repayment is the next refinancing or equity raise. So somewhere, and I should know this because I've asked them several times and it always escapes my mind. Somewhere along the line, they got this great idea that they were going to do equipment because nobody, if you look at all these senior secured deals, equipment's rolled in as all assets, but they provide no um, borrowing against the equipment. Really, it's real
Sure.
estate and licensing. So they're going to do equipment finance and somehow decided it would be great if they were a captive. So connected with this company that made extraction equipment really for the hemp industry. Wound up wasn't a real great fit either way. Um, but they still wanted to focus on extraction. That was viewed as like the cream of the crop of the equipment.
Sure.
So severed their relationship with the manufacturer, tried to be a little bit of a vendor agnostic. During this time, I was talking to David and kind of brainstorming ideas, even though I wasn't getting paid, brainstorming ideas as to how we
Sure.
could build this business. I think in early 20, they hired Ken Center, our director of client services, a long time in the industry. Um, basically head of our sales, and he actually joined the company officially before I did. Worked with them. We all worked to put together our documentation to really look like an equipment finance company. And then we've just really kind of transitioned. At first, it was just extraction equipment, and then we wanted to expand. We've got great customers who have always pushed us to consider other things. So we went from extraction to production and packaging to lights to HVAC and whatever. And we've just grown our sphere of types of assets. Again, somewhat agnostic as long as the obligor qualifies.
Sure.
And have built this to, like I said, $100 million portfolio, and a little bit slow right now. I mean, this industry sort of reminds me of the dot-coms. Early on, it was heavily reliant on equity investments, because everybody was losing money. Well, we're in a period right now where there's not a lot of capital available to these companies, and they've decided or realized that, hey, we can't just focus on top line growth. We really have to focus on profitability. So you're seeing that with a lot of our customers now.
Sure. And it's also as these states continue to legalize the particular product, the byproduct of this stuff, what does that do? Like, because I believe when like, what was it, Oregon was one of the main states that did it, but it's
One of
like they
the,
could grow it there, but then you couldn't transport it across borders for other states
well,
where it wasn't legal. And it's like, well, how does this
yeah,
work?
you know, it's an interesting industry because, you know, obviously it's a listed uh, drug. It is federally prohibited, but you know, you have, I should know this, but one of the attorneys general decide, you know, came out with a statement, said we're not going to prosecute um, cannabis operations and, you know, legal operations in legal states, which really allowed states to start expanding. Um, you know, the number of states going from just medical to recreational, and it's really, to me, not an issue as far as, you know, understanding where it's legal, where it's not. I mean, there's licensing, there's all this stuff where you can confirm, yeah, this is a legal company. Um, what it does is every state or every company, if you're going to be a multi-state operator, you have to have your everything set up in every single state. So you have to have a separate retail network. You have to have your separate manufacturing or cultivation. And even if you're in neighboring states and you've got 150,000 square foot cultivation and production facility in one state, you have to have the same thing in the next state, you know, because you can't, like you said, you can't transport across state lines. So, you know, I think it certainly drags down the efficiency and the profitability of companies.
Sure.
But you know, it's just part of the business.
I mean, I went to one of the places because Arizona legalized it a couple of years ago, and I went there, and it was you know, you have an armed guard and an ATM machine because you can't use a credit card to pay for
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
And you're just kind of like, what am I doing here? It's just kind of funny, just because it's kind of foreign to, you know, that concept.
Yeah.
But I get it.
Well, you know, and there have been some instances where, you know, companies have tried to, you know, operators, you know, that certain states, I mean, there have been some instances in California where you've had some fraudulent situations where they were
Sure.
allowing people to pay with a credit card, but ultimately, you know, that, you know, they got their hand slapped pretty good. But it's, I mean,
I mean, they can use Venmo, right? I mean, I guess Venmo you can't use credit
yeah, I
card.
mean,
So,
you've got some of the larger operators actually have their little um, credit program, if you will. You know, you get one that I know that has it is Columbia Care. They have a, you know, Columbia Care card, and you get approved for a little, you know, whatever your credit
Oh,
limit is.
that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's not run through MasterCard or Visa or a bank,
Sure.
but it's there. But yeah, you know, it's certainly one of the challenges. You know, obviously a very liquid industry if you're 100%
Sure.
cash, at least on the retail basis. And yeah, they spend a lot on security and vaults and all that to keep the cash.
I just think of the market that they're missing because of, you know, there's not those transaction fees, there's not those other fees, and it's like,
well,
you know,
they get you know, all of them, like you said, they have an ATM right there in the store, and you know, all of their income statements have a little line item, you know, ATM fees. So
dropping off today's cash load.
One of our, you know, and a lot of this underwriting takes me back to my Textron days where, you know, you had something a little bigger than mom and pops, but still not sophisticated. Not to say that the operators in the industry aren't sophisticated, but you don't have the time in business. You don't have
Sure.
as good a quality financial. So actually, one of our you know, we just signed up for PayNet to do the non-cannabis stuff, but you know, there aren't a lot, like I said, there aren't a lot of excess financial. Nobody's reporting it.
Sure.
But one of our underwriting items is to review bank statements, and it's pretty mind-boggling to see, $500,000 deposited, I mean, once a week, and then so
it's like it's Scarface. They just drop it off in a bag and they say, "Here, have fun."
That's something. Sometimes you'd see companies, they've got 5 deposits a month, and so that means they've got these dispensaries are sitting on tons and tons of cash, and they're not able to use it, because it's locked in. So as we saw, and I remember early on, looking at a financial statement and seeing every day at 4:00 you had 6 deposits, because they had 6 dispensaries. I'm like, wow, this company's it tells you something about their process and their diligence. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but yeah, a lot of cash runs through these businesses.
So the new line of business, diversifying, not just cannabis, overall well received, like you said, in the industry. When does that officially start? Are you already started, or?
Well, we announced, intended to start off right away, and I tend to like to kind of have rolling starts, make sure you can handle the business, and in particularly this industry, you can't disappoint by having 3-week turnaround times or whatever. So our plan was to kind of gradually roll in a few select sources, kind of get our base, move on, add to the team, and there was just such a response to our offering that we saw the need and the opportunity for much larger scale. So we're still taking deals in right now. We're the ones where there's some time and we've okayed it with our source, we're doing the underwriting aspect, but we'll probably go live officially once we get our second round of financing and equity in place, and we got all the new codes established and everything. We expect it will be at the end of July, early part of August, but right now we've seen over $100 million of transactions, and I think we'll see some very significant fundings as soon as we turn on the lights.
That's fantastic, and that kudos to you and your team for being able to generate that buzz in such a short period of time. So,
well, it was, I would say, kind of dumb luck. Like I said, David and I have talked a long time about, do we focus on industries? Do we focus on types of equipment? And I always kind of got back to where I felt like my comfort was, but where you could get the best risk return trade-off, and it's in that B to triple C type area. Sure. I think there's a lot of perceived, not actual risk, where you can get some outsized returns. And what we found is that there's not just a ton of people out there ready, willing to write decent sized checks for those types of borrowers. So we underestimated the market, and
the timing's good, especially with the banks and their credit boxes shrinking up, and if you want to go out to those like the C++ minus, I think you have to be more of a specialist to be able to turn that around.
I agree. We're not interested in becoming fantastic at repossessing and reselling equipment and valuating it and all that.
All right, so I'm gonna have a really ignorant question here. So when you repossess cannabis equipment, do you have to take all the product back with you, or does that have to stay?
Well, theoretically, it would have to stay. You don't get to enrich yourself with that. But knock on wood, we've actually not had any repossessions or even delinquencies. Because again, awesome. We've used now we are public, and we've purposefully left some meat on the bones We just didn't want to stretch and have some, when you're, a $20 million portfolio like we were 18 months ago, a $2 million customer, pays 30 days late, you're 10% delinquent, and that's just not good for the company. It's not good for the investors. So we were selective, but we apply the traditional underwriting strategies. It's time in business, and yes, it's a young industry, but have the owners, have the managers built and run similarly scaled businesses. Is the equipment essential? That's the first question we always ask, in any place in equipment finance. Does the scale support the ask? We're still underwrite to our primary repayment source being cash flow from operations. A lot of companies aren't there. Okay, well, we get into the budgets and the pro forma or the projections, and see, are they going to be 1-to-1 by the midpoint of our contract? And we've been pretty fortunate. Like I said, we've got a good team. We've identified the right opportunities. We've approved and funded the right opportunities. And again, knock on wood, we've not had any.
That's fantastic. So I do have to.
You are correct. You would have
to. Just sorry, I couldn't help myself. And I asked everyone who comes on here, Jim, to give me a little fun fact about themselves. Anything you'd like to share with the audience here?
Fun fact about myself. Well, probably the fun fact that people that know me know, my true passions are my kids and the Miami Dolphins. Okay. But a lot of people don't know that I also have a true passion about cooking. And every night that we eat at home, I pretty much cook from scratch 2 meals, because one of my kids is a vegetarian. And I really dig into some interesting cuisine. We like to be adventurous, and I'm pretty good at I don't do well creating my own recipes, but I can find recipes that kind of sound good, modify them to something we like. And if you ever try to call me late in the afternoon, early evening, you're going to hear the chopping board as I'm slicing and dicing.
That's awesome. I am the cook in our house too. Sometimes I get lazy because it's like, you're traveling so much, and I love going out to nice dinners, as people probably know me in the industry, but there's nothing better than cooking something from scratch at home. I'll send you some photos of some of the stuff and throughout COVID, it's like I started making my own like cheese, like mayonnaise, pesto. So it's actually really so. I mean, if I can figure out how to do it, it's pretty,
one of the things I enjoy cooking the most is Indian cuisine.
Okay. And, I've never tried it, just because it scares me a little bit.
It did me too, and it's something that we enjoy. We enjoy eating, food, Indian food. And I just tried it one time, and it's laborious, but man, it's a labor of love. And I can, as I do it, I can imagine, little Indian grandmothers and mothers, just leaning over their stove all day. But it's time consuming, but it's very rewarding when you see the outcome.
It's like I made risotto once. I'm like, I'm not doing this again. This takes forever.
My vegetarian's favorite food is eggplant. Okay. And I can't stand eggplant. Don't like the taste, don't like the texture. So it was a trial and error, for probably a year and a half, because if I tasted it, I wouldn't have liked it. So, every night at dinner, my fiance thought it was rough. I'm like, how do you like it? And I get, really good constructive criticism. And
here's some salt.
At one point, about 3 years ago, he was just about ready to give up on eggplant from me. But then I made an eggplant parm and
I thought you were going to say I'm giving up on being a vegetarian. Then it's like, it worked. It worked.
I'm surprised. But no, if you're passionate about it, you love doing it, then you keep trying. And
well, that's awesome. I had no clue. I'll have to send you some videos that I actually created of making some of these things. People were like, "How do you do that?" It's like pretty simple.
It really is once you get to it.
No, now it's when that feedback, like you said, it's when you spend a couple hours cooking a meal and someone's like,
Well,
like, maintain calm. I have a hard time with that. It's like, well, then make it yourself.
Yeah, no, fortunately, I've always promoted just very open and good conversation with my kids. So I mean, he can sit there and say, "Well, this kind of sucks, Dad," and I'm like, "Okay, why does it suck?" Well, it's not done enough, or it's overdone, or it doesn't have enough cumin in it. And I'm sitting here in my mind just making notes, next time and next time. And now there'll be a few. It's kind of hard to find those. Another cuisine he likes is Sri Lankan. Well, I went out and made some of the things he likes to get from this restaurant, and he's like, "Now you ruin it for me because I don't have to go to the restaurant to get it."
You ever go to one of those Japanese like supermarkets with all this eclectic food like durian, and then you're like, "I want to try this," and it's like, God, it smells horrible, but it tastes good.
Thank God for Amazon. I mean, you can get everything you want now, just about.
It's fair. It's fair. All right, sir. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you today, Jim. Thanks for sharing your story and Excess Financial. Hopefully our paths cross at some equipment finance event at some point, because while your face looks familiar, I know we've chatted before, I honestly don't know if our paths have crossed in my 23 years.
We probably not face to face. I've participated in some ELFA events, but what I found out, while there's so much benefit you get from being there, and it's nice, talking to people and whatever, if I'm gone 3 days, it feels, once I get back to my desk, it feels like it's 3 weeks. It's like, oh my gosh.
It's fair. It's fair. Well, I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you,
have a good
and
day.
thank you again for inviting us. Okay.